Could Have Been Great is a pop culture podcast where some pals talk about stuff we wish we liked more. We even love things we criticize on the show. Some of them. We also think it's totally cool if you love the thing. More power to you. We just think that it could have been great. Welcome to It Could Have Been Great, a roundtable discussion where we attempt to fix mostly mediocre media. Spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Diana Paparozzi, and today, for the first time, I'm joined by my good friends.
I'm Sarah Shope, localization enthusiast with good taste but low standards.
I'm Danny Paparozzi, and if I could, I'd be a waterbender.
And I'm Andrew Ligori, and I still can't write a bio.
Beautiful. Good job, everyone. So welcome, everybody, to the inaugural episode of It Could Have Been Great. This podcast is where I and a bunch of my friends, assorted friends, there will be more friends, there will be different friends. I have a lot of friends.
You're replacing us?
We're the best ones, though.
Apparently we're being replaced, y'all. I don't know how to feel about this.
I'm her brother.
Sorry, I already recorded a couple episodes before this one, so technically this is episode 3.
Oh, but they don't know that, Diana.
Yeah, way to pull back the fucking curtain in front of the wizard.
Yeah, anyway, don't worry, we can edit it all in post. Anyway, so this is a conversation I have with all of my friends all the time, and it's, this thing had potential, and we're angry that it did not meet its full potential. So what is this thing? Well, this week, it's The Legend of Korra, sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is set during the life of the next Avatar, Korra, and was initially advertised as a more focused miniseries, 12 episodes only, revolving around Korra working on issues in Republic City, a new place that came into being after the big war of the first series. And then it was renewed for additional seasons because it was super popular. The story follows Korra as she takes on various threats to the world and grows and develops as a person, or doesn't do that. Actually. So, did I miss anything there, y'all? Did y'all want to chime in any hot takes on what Korra's about before we get into it?
I mean, it's mostly about a bunch of, trash teens doing unlikable things and being unlikable is, what it comes down to. Yeah. And I don't use the term trash teens lightly because I think that, some of the best media is about trash teens. I love trash teens. Trash teens are great because they become not trash teens.
Yeah, and I really wanted to like this show specifically because, it has a female main character, and like Avatar, it's starring all people of color, which is great, and it's super diverse, and yeah, but then it was not very good. So just as a disclaimer, we're not gonna be bashing it for, stupid sexist reasons, since y'all are new here and don't know whether or not we're jerks yet. We are not jerks in that specific way.
We're snobs, not mobs.
Yeah.
We're the people who, put truffles on our french fries and go, yes, we're them.
I think it's important to say at this point that, after The Last Airbender came out, Airbender was clearly a show marketed towards kids, but it had a lot of really mature themes that anyone could enjoy. Korra seemed like it was going to really zero in on mature themes the entire time. And with a new environment that's a little bit more modern, characters that have sort of, older, more mature problems. And I guess the question that we'll be answering over the next period here is, did it actually portray any themes in a likable way, in a way that made any narrative sense?
Yeah, did it deliver on these things? Let's find out. So that actually is a good segue into our first topic, which is kind of what they were trying to do. What they were trying to accomplish with The Legend of Korra, and obviously, it was just, hey, what's the next Avatar doing? That would be cool to explore, and let's be more mature about it, as Danny so aptly put it. And then they also put in some different political themes. One thing that people have noted is each season kind of deals with a different system of governance, sort of, or different political issue, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But that seems to be another issue they wanted to tackle. And so what do we think they actually did accomplish? Because honestly, it's kind of a mess narratively, and I'm not sure what they managed to do.
Okay, I'll start us off here. I think the actual world that was presented to us was perfect.
Yes, they did accomplish some really cool and logical world building from where things seem to be naturally heading at the end of The Last Airbender.
Yeah. I would say that maybe the industrial stuff came a little quickly and as far as timeline, but I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for that because it's cool.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
And also, like, I think my only problem with the world building in that regard is the world building was fine. I'm with Diana here. I think that it did go a little too quickly, but I think that what was nice about it was that it did try and present, like, a more realistic political situation, especially because you had situations where the leaders of the governments didn't want to get involved in internal matters of other nations. And I think the problem that we run into is that, like, we never saw how this technology was really changing the world in a feasible way outside of, like, bigger machines to fight wars with.
Yeah, that is true. We never really, other than, like, very early in the first season, we see Mako do some lightning bending in a factory for a bit. Other than that, the only purpose technology seems to serve is joyriding or building bigger mechs.
Yeah, but they did have some sick fucking rides, let's be honest here.
That's true.
Yeah.
I do think they did that well, though. I think that the only problem is, like, when they did try and show, like, nuanced political situations, literally every single time they tried to take a certain approach to it, it always devolved into, well, you know, we can't get involved, and then by not getting involved, things got infinitely worse. And so it sort of, like, tacitly endorses this weird interventionist form of foreign policy, which just got kind of weird after a while, because it's like...
Yeah, most of the conflicts are resolved by Korra punching better than whoever espouses a different view.
Yeah.
And so that's not, like, a super nuanced political discourse.
I think one of the things they set out to accomplish with this, that they did accomplish, is having an avatar that was completely different from Aang.
That's true.
It's not really a good thing, but they definitely did that.
It felt like they kind of just made an inverse Aang instead of making a real character, and so, unfortunately, Aang, I feel like his defining characteristic to, like, viewers is he's just so darn likable. He's so cute. And in making, like, an inverse Aang, I think they accidentally just made an inherently unlikable character.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna get some hate for saying that, because I don't find Korra to be particularly likable, but we'll get more into why I think that later. And let me be clear here, every one of us was super hyped for this show, and for the first 6 episodes. Oh. And honestly, for a little while after that, we were all there. I made jackets.
Yeah.
We had Fire Ferret fan club jackets.
Yeah.
I loved Korra. I loved what they were doing. I loved Mako and Bolin so much. Mako was on my jacket.
Same.
Bolin was on mine because Bolin was the better brother. He was the best, and then they killed him.
Yeah, character-wise.
He lives. Does he? Does he really?
I remember us driving around, like, theorizing about who Amon was.
Yeah.
And like, trying to puzzle that out.
We were super into it, and then in the latter half of season 1, we were kind of like, well, that wasn't how we wanted it to be resolved. I actually called the ending very early in the season. Like, it's probably going to be, like, some important character's brother or some nonsense.
Oh, yeah. You as a throwaway joke, were just like, yeah, it's probably that.
Yeah, and then you guys were like, man, I sure hope it isn't that, though, because wouldn't it be cool if Asami were Amon? Because that was still floating around.
That was a cool theory.
I remember a theory I thought was really cool at the time was that whenever Azula shot Aang at Crossroads of Destiny at the end of Season 2 in The Last Airbender, the Avatar cycle actually got reset at that moment. And so Amon was like this sort of anti-Avatar. And like, Aang, was supposed to die at that point, but he didn't, and then he reset the cycle again when he died naturally. Anyway.
Yeah, and you could have such an interesting thing with Korra where it's like, is she even the real Avatar? Like, is she worthy? Is she, like, a failed Avatar? And you didn't need to give Amon bending powers. It could have been a thing where, like, whoever, like, the person in his cycle was, that new cycle before him, like, he could have gone to the Lion Turtle and been like, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to be a bender because he doesn't like bending. And then the Lion Turtle's like, okay, it takes it away. But then he inadvertently learns energy bending through that, and it's like, oh, now I can fix the world.
And then is like, you know what would fix that? If we just didn't have bending and made everyone equal, kind of, like, Incredible style.
Unfortunately, that did not happen.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and we'll get more into what we wish they had done with Amon later. And this kind of bleeds into our next little section here of what we wanted them to do. And a lot of it was just, we wanted them to do what they did better. Because a lot of the themes that they bring up, like, they start out with these really good, complex ideas, and then they just fall flat on their face in the execution. Which is why this is kind of our ultimate this could have been a great show. We really think this is almost a really good show. And of course the animation and music are beyond question amazing. Like, there's the technical aspects of the show are worth praise, and I will not be mentioning them further because they're amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except for the mechs. CGI mechs were terrible. I hate them.
I mean, you do what you gotta do, but generally it was a gorgeous show.
It was.
And they did have cool concepts, I feel like, for each season, even, I hate to say it, season 2, could have been cool.
Yeah, it could have been really interesting. But man, it was a rough one.
You know, Diana, earlier you said Korra was sort of like a inverted Aang because of the kind of character traits they chose to sacrifice with her. You know, what's interesting is that and I think we were all for having someone that was a complete contrast to Aang, but what was really great about Aang, you know, airbending was his only real bag that he had when the series started. And so he learned all these different aspects of his temperament from learning the other different types of bending. And he grew as a character every time he got a new teacher and mastered a new form of bending. Korra, the only bending she really needed to learn in the course of the series was airbending. And I never felt like she developed as a character at all in the course of learning
I feel like she learned how to learn airbending wrong.
Yes. Yes.
And, we'll get into that.
Okay, real quick.
Yes.
You could say Korra is the yin to his Aang.
Are we these people?
Yes.
I am.
This is the podcast we've become.
Oh, Lord.
Also, a shout out to the voice actors, too, because everyone is very well acted, even if they're given really terrible, awful lines.
Yes.
They're doing a really good job with the material, considering a lot of it isn't very well written. In our opinion.
I can agree with that.
Shout out to them. Janet Varney does a great job.
Yes.
And I don't really remember who else does voice acting in that show. Seychelle Gabriel, who was Yue in the really bad live action movie, does a great job as Asami Sato, and that's the only other voice actor I remember being on that show.
You know, I think in general it's actually fair to say about 99% of everything we're going to be criticizing is based on the narrative.
Yes.
Yeah, we're really, and that's kind of the focus of the show in general, unless a technical aspect is something that's keeping the story from being as good as it could have been, and it's like a laziness thing, not this was made in 2000 when CGI sucked, or something like that. So we're generally going to try to keep it narrative focused, and that's a good thing to bring up to let everybody know, hey, that's what we're doing. We're not here to nitpick, we're just here to kind of script doctor it, and maybe someday shows will hire us to script doctor for real and fix all of these things before they become disasters. I don't think that's going to happen because of a podcast, but I mean, hey, if you're out there, Brikey, if you're out there,
we got you.
And you want to do number 3, just have us.
And you know, it could be great.
Avatar 3, it's better now.
We fixed it.
So, speaking of good, positive things, let's talk about what we would like to keep from the original show, since we're going a little long on our intro, which is fine, first episode. But what that is in the original property, what do we feel is worth keeping, and why? And I would like to start off by saying the first 6 episodes are undeniably incredibly solid.
I agree.
They do a great amount of world building without it ever feeling like a lot of exposition. They introduce all of these characters so compellingly that by episode 2, I was making jackets that cost $40 each.
Yep.
And because that's just what it costs to make custom clothing those days. I made my work schedule work around it because the first couple episodes were so good that I was like, listen, GameStop, I can't work before noon on Saturdays anymore.
Yeah.
Screw you, I have to be home and watch my show. Back when I had cable.
Because it was so good.
It was so good.
I want to add to that, you know, because the first 6 episodes of the first season were so good, it inevitably made the pain that much worse whenever it started being inconsistent from there on out. But really, they did a great job establishing the rules of the world. All the characters at that point were likable. We didn't really get into the depth of them, or the lack thereof, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but their general intros were all very compelling and fun, and we were like, hey, I'm ready to get to know this character, and I think they're really cool.
I think the only, not great thing about those first 6 episodes was the ham-handedness already of them trying to force the love triangle and the shipping war.
Yeah. Which was, I was willing to hand-wave it specifically because I was like, well, this show's for teens, and teens dig that kind of plot. That was back during the Twilight Wars. So people were very into love triangles. So I was like, it's okay. That is I was never super into the shipping in the original show either that existed. So, that's always been an aspect of Avatar that I'm willing to just kind of be like, oh, that's there, and it's not for me. It's for somebody else, and that's fine. But yeah, it did start getting a little ham-handed in that area.
Well, because of the Zutara and the Katang wars back for the original series, Breaky knew about that. Breaky being Brian Konietzko and Mike DiMartino, the creators. Yeah. We call them Breaky because it's easier to say. They knew about all that. They knew about that fan response, and they really tried to engineer it for Korra.
Yeah. Which kind of felt heavy-handed.
I think what made this hard to watch this show as it continued to drag on and, get worse and, kind of stick in this, sort of bubble of mediocrity is that it wasn't just that it could have been great. It was great for these first 6 episodes.
Yeah, and arguably was fine for most of the first season.
Mm-hmm.
We saw this world, and like I said, they built a very compelling world. And seeing how it had changed was fascinating. And I am all about that aesthetic of, roaring 20s, speakeasies, and, the idea of, pro-bending existing as this, something where it's, we would see sports here and there in Avatar, but they didn't have a chance to really have sports because you had this giant war in the backdrop. Everything was colored by this war. So seeing this world at peace was absolutely fascinating.
For sure. It was great. And then...
we had characters who, as y'all said, from the get-go, we were invested in Mako and Bolin, who... I think that the triangle that I could get behind and, really appreciate was Mako, Bolin, Korra, as a Korra likes Mako, Bolin likes Korra. Mako is not involved, which is what they were going for at first.
Yeah.
But then introducing Asami added this element of well, why here? Why is this happening? Because the initial thrust of this season, grounding Korra pro bending, having different sides of her personality brought out by Mako and Bolin. Was really interesting, especially with the backdrop of this equalist conflict, and that was fascinating. But then we have, I think it was episode 7, 6 or 7 was the last good one. It was as soon as they lost the pro bending finals and the Wolfbats lost their bending.
Then it just kind of went downhill from there, and it was a slow decline at first, and then they saw the slippery slope and grabbed a goddamn sled.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh. I want to comment on that part because, I remember I did a little write-up reflection thing after season 1 of Korra ended because I had a lot of feelings about it. And I remember where my grievances really started to show was at the same place Andrew was just mentioning, at the end of that pro-bending circuit. And what I really didn't like about how they chose to handle it is that they really hadn't talked about Unman since about the first maybe 3-4 episodes of the series.
Yeah, they kind of just forget about him for a bit.
And then all of a sudden, at the end of the pro bending circuit, he just shows up. He's like, everything you guys have been doing, every plot arc you guys have had going on, that's meaningless now. I'm the only thing that matters. Here's the actual plot. And at that point, it had half the season to resolve it. I had reservations at the time, but I assumed they were going to pace it in some way that made sense. But the way they kind of just shoved Amon in felt very awkward and rushed pacing-wise at the time.
Yeah, and I think part of that was learning how to write to a 12-episode rather than 20-episode format, so I was willing to forgive it at the time, and I was like, well, now they've learned, and they'll get better the next season, and then they really didn't. But we're supposed to be talking about good things right now, so let's hold our hold for a sec.
We're bad at this part.
That's probably going to be a running theme of oh man, this was fine, but it could have been better.
Yeah. So the Wan episodes were also really, really good. And honestly should have just been, in my opinion, their own spin-off short.
Should have been OVA.
An OVA. Or a comic or something.
Or a movie. Like an hour and a half movie, 90-minute movie would have been awesome with that. Mm-hmm. You could have had a little bit more time to kind of flesh out that world a bit more of the Wan journey. Yeah. And kind of explore spirits a bit more. But Wan was
So
awesome.
For a little bit more context on this, just because we haven't explicitly said it, the Wan episodes were the 2 episodes towards the beginning, or the earlier part of season 2.
It was middle-ish, because that was when she had gotten amnesia.
Oh, right, yeah. Andrew, by the way, has watched everything this week because he's a champion.
Thank you, Andrew. But anyway, so it's 2 episodes that tell the story of the first Avatar, which, honestly, if you removed all the little bits at the beginning of the first one and the end of the second one that involve Korra and her remembering it, and kind of take it out of the plot, it really doesn't have any bearing on the overarching plot of Korra at all, and is just a fascinating...
I mean, it does introduce
Rava. I was going to say, it introduces, like, the Avatar spirit and the anti-Avatar spirit, which is the big climax at the end of season 2, and it's really
such a dumb idea.
Which, can we just say how much we all adored that? Just wowie, folks.
Wowie.
That was a time.
But yeah, there were. I agree with Danny in that there would have been better ways to introduce that concept without Juan, but Juan's stuff was really incredible. So I
agree that it should have probably been a standalone thing, because, even all the way down to the artistic style of those 2 episodes, it's very unique to how Avatar looks in both Korra and The Last Airbender.
Hey friends, I just had a cool idea that maybe someday will happen. What I would have preferred to The Legend of Korra would have been a series of made-for-TV movie shorts, 60 to 90 minutes, like the One episodes, about just different avatars.
That would have been awesome.
Oh,
yeah.
I
would love that.
That could have been so great.
I would have been in on that.
Yeah, maybe they'll still do that.
Ground floor.
I would love that.
No, they won't.
Yeah. Anyway, that would be cool. Anyway, so those, we don't have any issues really with the One episodes, other than that we don't like the Rava Vatu thing, which we'll get back to. Zahir and friends were a fine concept, and Zahir himself was a fairly compelling villain, so I'm willing to put him in the good category, even though I have a lot of issues with how it was handled.
Although the bending got...
Yeah.
I think that was the point where bending reached, this point
It became Dragon Ball Z instead of Avatar, and it was just it was like, oh, but he's so powerful. How will we stop him?
Remind me how Zahir became an airbender, because I know that was a thing that happened. I just don't remember how.
I think it's when they opened the spirit world at the end of season 2.
Yeah,
airbending
the harmonic
returned.
Convergence.
Yeah,
the harmonic convergence made all the airbenders, and he became an airbender and was like, well, what we really needed to make this whole quartet work was the last bender.
Yeah,
and now
I have 3
folks.
friends for each nation, and I didn't have one.
I was just a guy, and now I'm floating around. And also, by the way, how did this guy learn about about this guru's teachings about untethering yourself from your earthly coil? He just knew that from being and he was in jail for 13 years. So I guess they were just giving him literature.
Yeah, maybe they just bring him a lot of books. But we'll get back to that bit. But real quick, what harmonic convergence is the big final battle happens at the end of season 2, while the spirit world and the real world are just kind of all up in each other's business, getting so right.
Connected for the first time in 10,000 years.
Yeah, and the implication is that the spirit oversoul that is the harmonic convergence was like, oh crap, there's no more airbenders. We need to make more airbenders so we can restore harmony and balance. And so then there were a bunch of airbenders.
Right.
All of a sudden, just random people became airbenders, and that is
which is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't hate that idea, because again, it introduces a new element to contend with.
Yeah. But Zahir just gets too good too fast at it, which is a problem we'll come back to. And speaking of villains that I thought were cool-ish, Kuvira was, I think, a very good, compelling villain. But by the time season 4 rolled around, and I watched most of it, I think I've missed 1 or 2 episodes. I did watch the end, and I did watch the build-up, so I'm missing 2 episodes in the middle there. But Kuvira, I think, was a good idea, and she is a good character. The story elements around her don't execute very well, but I don't find fault with her as a person, as a character.
I agree with what you said. By the time season 4 rolled around, Kuvira might have worked well for me in a vacuum, but as the 4th season of Korra, and by that point I was very sort of soiled on the series.
Yeah, same.
If they didn't fix the pacing in season 4, nothing was going to fix it for me, and they didn't fix the pacing in season 4.
Yeah.
That's really what killed them, with their interesting ideas and interesting villains, and then the pacing every season just was terrible.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Kuvira, and again, I literally just watched this season. Again, they had this idea to introduce these sort of bigger concepts than just save the world. It's well, how do you...
Once the world's at peace, how do you keep it that way, basically? How do you govern?
Yeah.
Right. And I think the problem is that instead of following through on those ideas, they repeatedly reduced things to, we have to stop the bad guy from doing their bad guy.
Exactly.
And it's Kuvira is an interesting dynamic of competent governance with a competent, strong government, which is supposedly capable of like preventing bad things from happening to the people.
But then starts flirting with fascism because it's too much, and that's a cool concept. But I don't think Korra was ever a strong enough character to be Kuvira's opposite.
Yeah.
Right, because every single time there's an enemy, I never saw Korra assert herself in front of an enemy outside of to finally be like, well, now we're having our final fight.
Yeah, she only ever talks with her fists.
Yeah, and like Amon, it's understandable because Amon is a scary, almost like boogeyman-esque figure for benders. And the idea of like, what happens if you take away the avatar's bending is really interesting. But then you hit like every other enemy. It's like, Udalak, her uncle from season 2, she just listens to him. Everything he tells her. She just listens.
Yeah. She doesn't ever have a compelling thought to return because she hasn't thought it through. And that's like her character, but also she's an ill-fitting protagonist for a show that's trying to be about big ideas.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, by the time we reach Kuvira, where you expect Korra to have grown to the point where she's willing and able to stand up to these people. She had just overcome her trauma from fighting Zahir and like the poisoning and all this stuff. And you think like, okay, Korra's finally ready to stand up to Kuvira. As soon as Kuvira just kind of like flashes her a smile and just goes, well, Avatar, let's call a truce for a minute, okay? And then she's like, well, okay, enemy who is like very clearly trying to take over like everything. Since you asked nicely, let's have a truce.
I think this all goes into our pattern of the parts being really good, but then the execution not being, because we're all talking about a lot of things we liked about Amon, Zahir and his Goonies, and then Kuvira, but and to a much less extent Unalaq. I don't have anything positive really to say about.
No, Unalaq was garbage.
But I really I remember being very excited the first half of seasons 1, 3, and 4, because I remember all those times I was like, okay, well, I really like this villain, I like where they're going with this, but I never felt satisfied after that. But we're talking about the good stuff right now.
Korra feels like putting Goku into Full Metal Alchemist.
Interesting.
And instead of having to actually navigate this landscape of a world at war with itself and, there was a genocide and all of this complicated shit going on in the background, Goku just launches a spirit bomb at, what's his name, Hohenheim? He just launches a spirit bomb at him.
Okay, no spoilers, but Hohenheim was a good man.
No spoilers.
Yeah. Let's not.
Anyway, but it feels like Korra is a Dragon Ball Z protagonist, and she's trying to fit into a completely different world.
Yeah, she's not the right protagonist for the story they were trying to tell, and I think
exactly
more often than not, that's what let them down.
Yeah, because she's not, like, in a different context, I think she would be a perfectly fine protagonist in a show like DBZ, or even in the original series. Yeah. Korra works well in a narrative where the goal is beat a bad guy.
Who is bad.
Yeah, she is not mature enough for this more mature story. She acts like a 12-year-old.
Yeah, which is funny because Aang, in a lot of ways, is a lot more mature than Korra, who is older and was made so they could deal with older themes. So, in a lot of ways, she ends up being more childish than Aang, who was literally 12. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of Aang, the last good thing I wanted to talk about was Jinora.
Yay!
Before we get
Jinora's
on
great.
Another tangent, Jinora's great, and I love her, and I wish she had her own show instead of trying to fit into the background of Korra's show, because Jinora's great, and I have no problems with her, and she's a beautiful angel, and I love her.
That is, again, it's this interesting idea, which we never really go into it, other than to say, like, Tenzin is, like, a shitty teacher and a shitty dad and just kind of shitty. But, like, every Tenzin-centric episode is like, wow, Tenzin, you just kind of suck, huh? And he's and it takes all episode for him to realize that, and then he does. Jinora should have been the character. I agree she should have her own show, because her trying to grapple with, like, carry on the legacy of the Air Nation, especially if you consider her siblings who were just idiots most of the time.
Yeah, actually, real quick, I have a proposal. I think Jinora should have just been the main character of The Legend of Korra, just age her up a couple years to match the rest of the cast, and do everything else exactly the same. Like, just take Korra out, and instead of it being a show about the Avatar keeping peace here, it's about the new heir to the Airbenders.
It could also be pretty cool if you had Jinora still in the sort of focus role, but I think one thing that was missing from Korra that was really good in The Last Airbender, every time Aang learned a new element, he didn't learn it from sort of like a teacher of that art, like a sort of refined teacher. He learned it from sort of a friend, a peer to him. And, I think...
Who grew with him.
I think Jinora could have really played that role well for Korra.
Yeah.
Because Tenzin's teaching style obviously was never a good mesh.
It was never going to work for Korra, and it really never did, and Jinora is, such a good little character over there, just hanging out in the corner.
Being thoughtful
and not having her own show.
And plus, in a show where you have, this strong female protagonist, she could have filled sort of like a sister role, which would have been potentially a really interesting angle.
And they hint at it every now and then they just kind of drop it.
Right.
But Jinora's great, and she's kind of the best parts of Aang and Katara all rolled into one perfect Sun Angel child who I love. Have I mentioned I love Jinora?
You should love Jinora all the time. She is the best written character on the show. She is consistent in her characterizations.
Yeah.
We understand her motivations, and without having to explain Tenzin as every single episode, I'm sorry, I guess I just wanted to be my dad. But maybe I should have been myself.
Wow.
And it's yes, Tenzin, after the 4th episode, I think we've all understood that you shouldn't try to be Aang.
So,
you're not Aang, Tenzin.
I just want to make sure we touch on this, because there's one other thing. I'm looking at this outline of things we want to keep, and there's something I find to be a glaring omission. You may all disagree with me, but I think Varric is a wonderful, wonderful character.
Oh yeah, Varric's
he was
fine.
great, yeah.
Varric I take really no issues with.
I got some feelings on Varric.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
But we'll hash that out, buddy Baloo.
Let's talk about. We do have more good things to touch on. That's all the stuff worth keeping. And this section, I would like to go into themes and characters that are introduced that we think they're compelling, but they weren't fleshed out or were written out of the show too fast. And of course, number 1 on that list is your friend and mine, everyone's favorite sex riot, Tano.
Yes!
What a waste.
I want to fucking take the lead on this one. Tano should have been in the goddamn series. He should have been in the goddamn Team Avatar.
Yeah.
Hands down.
They set him up very well as a Jet-type character to get a redemption arc and be a dick at first and then come around and be redeemed. And, the formula was there. And then they were, season 6, they were just kidding. We actually always hated Tano. And we don't want you guys to be friends with him.
I feel didn't the writers, come out and say, no, Tano is supposed to be unlikable. He's not... Why are you liking him?
And that's kind of an issue I take with Brian and Mike as writers, because on the original show, and I don't think we've touched on this, there was a team of writers. Actually, a lot of the original series was written by a woman, but that's, neither here nor there. But I think giving Brikey the license to write the entire show themselves made it so that no one was editing them and saying, hey, you have a compelling thing here, why don't you expand it instead of just writing it out because it didn't shake out the way you thought it would.
That's an example of someone who really could have been this dark horse. Once they get renewed for 3 more seasons.
Yeah.
Because they then learn wow, we have 3 seasons to just play around in this cool world that we've expanded and built. It's, instead of having someone like Tano who, yes, Tano is a heel. His character is a heel.
For
in
sure.
wrestling. He is supposed to be at first very unlikable. You're supposed to be wait, Tano? That schmuck? No way! He's such a nerd! Fuck this guy!
Yeah.
Which, and at first he is that way. But, what Tano did in a lot of ways was he presented Korra with an actual rival. Yeah. Someone who didn't necessarily have to be, a villain in the first place to her. He was never going to be Zuko. Yeah. But that's beside the point. No one's ever going to fill in Zuko's role.
No one's ever going to be Zuko again, perfect. And we just all need to come to terms with there will never be another Zuko.
Right, but Tano, he offered such an interesting foil to Korra because he is also a waterbender. He's from the Water Tribe, and you can have an interesting arc about this is what happens when people from backwoods areas come here. I remember there was speculation about what if Tano is a swamp bender and that's why he is that way
because he has to overcompensate.
He's overcompensating for this, and at the end of the day, I think what really sold it for me was that moment where after Tano, who had brought out all these interesting colors in Korra. He brought out her rivalry, her confidence, her no, we're gonna win this. We're gonna do it. It made her an active member of the Fire Ferrets beyond just this is cool, I guess I'm making friends. No, now we're gonna win.
Yeah.
And Korra took charge. Korra was ready to win. And then after all that said and done, it was that episode right after he lost his bending when Korra went and talked to him.
Yeah.
And he was and his, like, I mean, obviously his hair wasn't as good, which, like, no, but that was great because it was a visual signal of, like, this is a defeated guy. This is a broken dude.
That's
who,
all
like,
he had. He doesn't know who he is anymore, and he's sympathetic in that moment, and in a way that Avatar was always great at doing. Like, I never expected to love Zuko.
Yeah.
I went in expecting to always want to shove that kid in a locker. He was.
I mean, that haircut?
Yeah.
No, sir.
But Avatar was always great at introducing these characters who are initially super unlikable and then making us care. Yeah. And they just set it up with Tano. They set it up and then they didn't knock it down. And they actually just put the Django away because it was over. And they were done playing with that character who had really, as Andrew said, brought out more character in Korra than anyone else in the series had managed to do at that point.
That's why that was a really good ship.
It was a good ship.
Yeah. It was the ship, in my opinion. And like, and what I think would have been great about it is like, it was that moment where like we see him afterwards and he just looks like this broken dude. He's talking to Korra, and she has to, see her rival as a person for the first time.
Yeah, which is, like, a huge moment of growth for her.
Yeah. We also see, like, Amon isn't just turning, like, criminal benders into non-benders. Like, he's taking away from people who... Tano's a shitty dude, but he's not, like, evil.
Yeah, and he relies on it for a living. So.
Yeah, and it was that moment where, like, there's a pause, and then Tano's there, and he says, like, you gotta get her for me, Korra. And it was this moment of, like, this is how you be the Avatar. You fight for people who can't fight for themselves. You bring balance back and you stop things like this from happening.
And you even do it for people you don't particularly like as people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a great moment of character development, and then they were just like, actually, no it wasn't, and
he could have grown into such a beautiful flower, but he was taken from us!
He would have been a beautiful, beautiful butterfly.
He was taken from us in the flower of his youth. I have a lot of fucking feelings.
Angel.
I have so many goddamn feelings about Tano.
Yeah.
That it is actually a problem at times.
Yeah. So in episodes 1 through 6, Mako and Bolin were very likable characters. You guys remember when they were likable?
Or like
what a world that
interesting
was.
Characters who made sense considering where they came from and cared about each other as brothers because they were the only ones who had each other and didn't just like abandon each other randomly season 2, season 3.
Like left and right, just all the time abandoning each other. But remember when they had each other's backs and Mako bought Bolin's favorite dumplings? And I really related as an older sibling who had a younger sibling who looked a lot like Bolin because Danny looks kind of like a Bolin type. And remember when Mako was on screen for about 10 seconds and I made jackets because I loved him so much?
Because he was a boxer he was a firebending boxer!
Yeah. He's a firebending boxer with a little brother who he loves and wants to protect.
And good eyebrows.
And also he's kind of quiet and shy overall, and he's got good eyebrows, and I was like, well, there he is, it's my favorite boy. And then they were
he was such a good boy!
And they were like, you know what, Diana? That's not your favorite boy. We're going to kill him now.
You know, I feel like the first 6 episodes for Mako and Bolin should be known as, like, the pre-Degrassi side of Legend of Korra. Because once they started bringing in...
The good boy
Once
days.
they started bringing in all the sort of shipping wars or whatever...
The drama.
Mako's character became absolutely non-existent in my opinion.
He was a spineless, just nothing.
Really nothing.
He was like, but the girl.
He was a cardboard cutout of Edward Cullen at that point.
Right,
He wasn't a person.
As I'm sure all of our 12 listeners can hear right now, this was an emotional time for us.
It was.
When we were all just like, who is this man?
Who is this god among men?
This leader of men. And then we realized it was no one. It was nothing.
We were tricked,
It wasn't
actually.
even us the whole time.
Yeah, it was a desert mirage, and we were just projecting what we wanted to see.
It was actually this boring dude who's like shitty that everybody's in a relationship with.
Yeah, and also his brother, eventually. And so that...
Bolin.
Yeah, so that was a good concept that came in and then was bad.
It's like if Luke and Leia, like, just turned out to be really shitty kids.
Yeah, just like, you know what would be cooler than saving the galaxy? TPing everyone's house!
And it's just like, no, that's not, you're the Jedi.
But then we watched 3 movies of them pulling crazy pranks, and it was Beavis and Butthead, but Star Wars.
And just so we're clear, while that would be a great movie, that is not the movie we are making here in our heads.
If A New Hope happened exactly the way it was, and then the second and third movies were just them going around TPing the Empire, and the Rebellion, and everyone, because they don't care. So anyway,
they don't care about your rules.
Yeah, I'm going to try to go through the rest of these pretty quickly because a lot of them I know we have bad things to say too. And we're getting
so many,
really long.
So many bad things
We're going so long on this one.
We're going really, really long, and that's okay. It's the first episode. We have a lot of feelings, but...
and we can cut it in post.
Heck yeah. So Asami's arc with her dad was a good idea, but it needed to be expanded. Janora's coming-of-age story is great and solid. It just takes away from Korra's story because there's a lack of narrative focus, and also because Korra's story is really uninteresting, to the point where I almost wrote this note as, Janora's coming-of-age story is great, and Korra's story takes focus away from it.
A, it does, and B, like, Season 3 could have just been Janora's coming-of-age story, and Korra could have not been there.
Yep, just like, it's the Legend of Janora now. So good!
Or even just like Janora's Good Time Fridays.
Yeah, this is about Janora and her friends.
Yeah, I don't watch that.
Yeah, so another good thing, a good point that was brought up and then not done anything with. Korra's struggle with depression for the one episode in which it exists does feel very raw and good. Like, it's a well-written episode about depression, except that there's only one of it, and then before and after it, there's, like, nothing.
Yeah, and she's the same person before and after. Like, there no change was made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know what? It's not depression. It's because you got some poison in you.
Yeah, you got that mercury in your bloodstream.
Yeah. Bugs in your blood.
They weren't like, hey, you know what? This is a hard thing to deal with, and it's gonna be hard. Instead, they were like, you know, it's better though if you it's all this fucking poison. You just get better and you get all that poison out of you. And I'm like, I don't know if I like this at all.
Yeah, I'm like, I get the metaphor, but also,
I was just gonna bring up that I remember when season 3 first ended, and there was that last scene where you see Korra in a wheelchair with sort of like the really the dead eyes. And I remember at the time, I unsurprisingly had issues with the pacing of the end of season 3.
Yeah.
And I texted Sarah about it, because I love talking to Sarah. I always have. And I remember she said something to the effect of, well, you know, I still think it had a pretty good portrayal of her depression at the end. But what's interesting is that if you think about it, the only real thing that was done was there was a lot of nuance in the animation of Korra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, they made the characters act it, but then they didn't really do anything in the writing. And I will give props to Brian and Mike for that, because they do a lot of the storyboards. So that I will give them, hey, they made it evident there, and that
gorgeous
counts.
series.
Yeah, but it was not quite enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't enough, because then we get Korra alone, like, chronologically, that's like 2 episodes later at most,
Yeah,
right?
I think so, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then, Korra had
that was
depression
second episode was Korra
for
left,
2.5 episodes, and then we're not going to ever show her having grown from overcoming that or reference it again.
Or, like, still dealing with it like you do with
Yeah,
depression.
because depression comes back, and it sucks.
But, like, what if Korra didn't have a character arc?
Yeah, they were like, what if she didn't have one, and we just kept going?
You know, now that you say it like that, I really think you're onto something here.
Yeah. Just kidding. We just solved the whole thing. Let's all go home.
You know, guys,
I thought
this
we were
podcast's
going long,
been fun.
but we can wrap it up here.
I think that really we don't do the podcast anymore, because we realize, you know, like, what if you just didn't write it
just,
well?
like, don't have a narrative.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, who needs that? So one other good thing, and this is not really a great thing as far as its narrative execution, so much as I think it's a good thing in a meta sense, whereas it's good for the world that it happened. Korra and Asami's relationship being confirmed and on screen as much as it could be was a good bone to throw to the LGBT community, because we need more representation over here. And also, at that point in the show, Asami was the only person she had a realistic relationship with anyway, so you might as well.
Yeah, she was the only one that made sense at that point. And it was not much.
She was the only person left.
But it was a huge step as far as that kind of representation, and it really paved the way, I think, for more modern shows like Steven Universe.
To get really explicit in there, hey, there's gays here.
Yeah.
Because we've always had subtext.
I have a point I want to make. Right off the bat, it is incredibly important to have good LGBT representation in kids, in all media, really. And I was happy at the time when they did that. But to me, their relationship falls in the category for me that they do at the end of every single season of Korra. The end of season 1 had the double suicide. 2 had the cutting off of the Avatar cycle.
Yeah.
3 had Korra going into depression, and then 4 had the relationship. And, you know, I feel like it was always done for shock value more than anything by the writers.
That's fair,
Interesting.
and I hadn't really thought about it that way. Again, I still feel it was a good thing overall, but that is a very good point.
Yeah, I mean it when I say, like, it's super important, and no matter how they wrote the show, I'm glad they had that in there.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, I really felt like they shoehorned one sort of big thing at the end of every season.
That's true.
Just so that no matter what, fans would walk away going, oh, but what about that double suicide? Well, that was so, etc.
I want to say right now, literally, all I needed to really buy into the ship, one scene where, like, Asami compliments Korra's biceps and Korra blushes. That's all I needed.
Yeah, that would do it.
Any build-up, like, because honestly...
I would have died on the hill of that ship, but instead, it was just like, I just watched this series. I finished watching it today. And they were like, but you know what? I guess we're in love. Yeah,
because we corresponded in letters that we're not going to tell you guys about.
Yes, that entire season, the only time they ever reference it for, like, the last 2 episodes is when Mako's like, why didn't you write to me, Korra? And Korra's like, because, I don't know, I wrote to Asami.
And you're a shitty person, Mako.
Yeah.
I will say that it is no better or worse than any other relationship in that series, except for Varric.
That's true. Varric and
Julie,
they were fine.
They were good.
The only well-written relationship in the entire series, in my opinion.
It almost didn't get there for me, because holy shit. That dude was so awful to her.
Yeah, it's true.
And then it came around.
It's true.
So let's move into...
Oh, and real quick, Equalists is great. Equalists were very fascinating. Didn't do well with it. Just had to throw that out there.
Equalists were a great concept, and they were right, and Amon had a really good point.
And Amon could have just been nobody. He could have just been a person.
It would have been so much better, and it wouldn't have undermined.
Anyone could be Amon!
The point is, it doesn't matter. We're all Amon.
It could have been great, guys.
It could have been great.
Howdy, folks. Diana here with your not quite an ad break, because we don't have any sponsors. But I did want to take some time to thank you for listening to our pilot episode of It Could Have Been Great, also Nostalgification's first podcast. If you're liking it so far, great. We really appreciate you listening and liking it, and you should leave a comment or something for us. Maybe a review, share it with your friends. You can also support us on Patreon if you really love it at patreon.com/itcouldhavebeen-great. It is all one word spelled the same way as the title of the podcast. No dashes or any crazy stuff like that. Or you can also support our Patreon for Nostalgification in general, if you would prefer, at patreon.com/nostalgification. We'd really appreciate it. Now, a little context for this next section here. We wanted to give you guys something fun to listen to as a little bit of a break here in between the halves of the episode, because it is a bit of a doozy. This is our quote-unquote sister podcast, which is It Can't Be Good, where we take genuinely bad ideas and attempt to salvage them anyway. So with that, I'm gonna let Past Me take it away. For this week, our challenge is to pitch a live-action Riverdale-style remake of Scooby-Doo.
Oh, easy!
The movies exist, so I'm counting this as an original property, and Andrew obviously already has ideas, so
I've seen some fantastic posts on Tumblr about ways to reimagine these characters, but they're not my ideas.
Well, you guys just go. Ready, set, go.
Go, Andrew.
It's your birthright.
Okay, so Scooby-Doo and Riverdale is, like, super easy because, number one, you gotta have a secret society, which is putting everything into place.
Yeah. I mean, Scooby-Doo is, like, a Cthulhu-esque type, like, god thing in the original show, so I think you can use that to build a secret society on.
What else? Okay, so it's super easy, okay? So Daphne and Freddy are the coolest kids at Scooby-Doo High, we'll call it. Scooby-Doo High, you know, it's a place where there is a serious pecking order. You are either cool or you are not. Now, enter in the new girl, Velma. Velma is not cool by any stretch of imagination, but Velma is someone who is fascinated by what's happening here. Her parents move with her to town because they are investigative reporters and they are on the lead of a big, big story. Something is strange in this town. Velma's interested into the school, and yeah, things aren't going great for her on her first day at school. However, as she is like kind of being low-key picked on by Daphne, suddenly something crazy happens. There's some kind of monster here. And everybody's freaked out, obviously. And so Velma and Daphne have to escape the situation, working together with each other for the first time, since Daphne's been kind of like shady to Velma, and Velma still helps her, which makes Daphne kind of be like, oh, fuck, I was a terrible person.
And then they're girlfriends at some point. They do have to be gay, I'm sorry. That it was a caveat I did not put in the prompt. They will eventually be girlfriends.
I can work with that. So they are escaping this thing, right? And then they're cornered, and it's bad. And everything looks like it's gonna go for the worst. And then enter Scooby-Doo and Shaggy.
The local pothead with his service dog for his anxiety dog.
Only this time, instead of being, you know, a couple of scaredy cat stoners, they're the only people who actually have an idea of what's going on in this town. Shaggy and Scooby have become this town's low-key budget monster hunters. They have been handling problems for a while now, and Shaggy and Scooby actually managed to drive off this creature. In the aftermath, we learned that Shaggy did in fact drop out of high school. He was expelled for a number of illicit activities and such. However, despite everything that Velma seems to think, Shaggy informs her, no, this is all real. These monsters are real and someone is bringing them up. Someone is creating them. And me and Scoob Man, like, we're gonna get to the bottom of this.
Well, man, that's a great pilot right there.
Yeah, I'm sold. I'll watch it.
Well, of course, you know, we can't forget, you know, the big problem, though, is, see, in this, from where I'm sitting, Shaggy and, what's the white guy's name? Freddy?
Yeah,
Fred?
Yeah, he's the one with he has a car, so that's why he's here.
Yeah, they are actually cousins.
Oh.
And things are not good between them.
Yeah.
And so that introduces that element of tension there, while Velma tries to kind of, like, figure out, like, what's going on in this town, like, with Shaggy and Scooby's help. And while Daphne kind of, like, has to have an awakening as a character, and the episode ends with they're all in trouble, Fred's been dragged into it too, and then Daphne shows up to save all of them.
Nice. Can she do it with Kung Fu? Because I have seen a lot of good meta going around about Daphne just happening to be a kickboxer.
Daphne can do it with whatever the fuck she wants.
Hell
Daphne
yeah.
Blake can handle her business,
It's
is
true.
what I'll say.
Well, hey, that was 5 minutes. That's a good show. That's a pilot right there.
There you
So,
go.
I stand corrected. I'm a fool for thinking.
I have a lot of stupid. I spend a lot of time thinking about stupid things which shouldn't happen, and then being like, yeah, but you could probably do one of these, and then a little bit of that, and then, you know, you probably have like at least like 7 seasons on CW.
Well, dang. Sarah, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm good. That was pretty
That
great.
was-
You know, I don't really,
Yeah.
I don't know too much about either property,
All
but
right.
all I can imagine is that Scrappy Doo would
No.
be
No.
hang on, hear me out. So
What do you have to say?
inexplicably, Scrappy Doo would be like a regular school student, right? So like he'd be all coming up like with like a little tie on, little like.
So, like, is he still a dog, though?
Yeah, no, like totally a dog. And Scooby's not a student, but Scrappy just is. And Scrappy would be kind of like a bully kind of character.
Well, that's because Scooby dropped out.
That's fair, but
He had his chance.
every time like a ghost or anomaly was coming around, Scrappy was always the first person to get their crap handed to him to sort of display the powers.
Just to show how tough it is. Yeah.
Yep. And so we kind of get to
Are you just gonna wharf Scrappy every single fucking episode?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what the people want, Andrew.
It's true. I'm okay with this now.
You know what? I'm not gonna let my vision be sullied because Scrappy Doo is like in my mind. I think honestly, if we're being real here, like.
So let's talk about topic number 2, what we want to get rid of. And to keep us from doing another 45-minute section on it,
Hey,
I'm going to do with us a lightning round. And we're all just going to say a thing. And then the next person's going to say a thing. And I'm going to start. So we're going to go
All right.
me, Andrew, Danny, Sarah. And we're just going to keep going until we run out of things to say. Are you ready?
okay.
Okay, number 1. Why can Korra punch airbending instead of having to learn airbending? Why did Amon taking her bending away make her able to airbend? Next.
I don't know, because every single time that anyone tries to establish, like, bending in this world, it doesn't make sense. In Korra, bending changes so much from Avatar, which doesn't make a ton of sense because, like, at the end of the day, bending is static. It has been static for so long, and even if we take into account Toph introducing metal bending, bending is martial arts. Even if we think about it changing, like, Korra doesn't change her bending style based on her elements. Aang did, Korra didn't. So at the end of the day, like, they just didn't do that well, and Korra never, like even as a kid, Korra could do 3 elements just cause. And it's like, the point of bending is that you move according to certain prescribed movements, and if you just get to do it what the fuck ever, then we just get to hear flying around, like, wee!
Whee! Alright, Danny.
The pacing of the entire series.
Great. Sarah.
We've already talked about it, but what they did to Bolin and Mako and their relationship with each other particularly.
Yeah, that is fair. Alright, me. Who is Asami Sato? Like,
Yeah.
I really love her design, and I love all of the things that happen to her character.
I love her electric glove.
Yes, everything about Asami is perfect, except she has no personality. Who is she? Andrew.
So Asami's just like, if Asami's like,
yeah.
if a 14-year-old's like, wouldn't it be cool if a girl was cool? I don't know, if she had like a lightning glove, fuck, that'd be cool. Yeah, man. Like Asami's someone who you could have made a very interesting like case about. Like, this is someone who is privileged by this new society, whereas Mako and Bolin are benders, but they are literally homeless street rats who have to like fight for people to throw them scraps. Yeah. And Asami is someone who like, she never calls her dad out on this, which would have been a very interesting idea. Just like, it's like, Dad, like, you are someone who has benefited so much from this world. And you've gained so much. I am also sorry that Mom is dead, but that doesn't change the fact that we have gained so much. And you can't just like sit here and shit on other people when like you have all this. Because like technology was already equalizing the playing field of people.
And that's why Asami should have been a Mon. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
It would have been so much.
Okay. Andrew, next round, you just say a new topic. You don't have to elaborate on mine.
Okay.
Yes, no problem. Those are all really solid points, and honestly, technically kind of count as their own points in addition. And Danny, go.
Oh, crap, I wasn't ready.
Okay, I'll go. We talked about it a little. Amon should not have been a bender because the non-benders had a point, the Equalist movement had a point, and they did not address it. They completely undermined it by having Amon turn out to just be a bloodbender, and then they just were like, oh, well, I guess the Equalists weren't a real thing anyways, and we don't need to listen to them anymore. Bye.
And then they suddenly are gone completely, and it's no longer a problem.
The Equalists should have been there throughout the whole series.
I agree. Danny, go.
I would have gotten rid of the part at the end of season 2 where they cut off Korra from the Avatar cycle.
Yeah.
Because I didn't actually see a single thing that did for the plot. Like, I could have seen at the time where they might have gone with it to develop Korra. But honestly, I feel like not only do we lose a lot from completely removing the possibility for Aang to come and talk to her or anything, but she didn't really grow as a result of losing the Avatar cycle, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and Korra just doesn't grow, as Sarah told us all, ever. Also, okay, now it's my turn, and why is Season 2 such a hot mess? Because I hate all of it, actually. I hate every second of Season 2 other than the Wan episodes. Every second of it is stupid, and the Everstorm is a dumb name for a thing, and that's a thing I hate.
The Everstorm is from Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson!
Right? That just happened to come out later, but yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah,
but you know what? That thing has when the Everstorm is using that thing, it's a forever storm that is just happening all the time and matters!
Yeah, and in this it's just like there, and it doesn't matter at all. And also, then all of the stuff that happens in the spirit world is stupid because it creates a power scaling problem of just like, actually, now we have spirit lasers, and now it's Dragon Ball Z. And Dragon Ball Z is a great show, but this is not Dragon Ball Z.
The spirit world was pretty cool, though.
It was very cool.
Yeah. Oh, shout out to Iroh.
Yeah, shout out to Iroh.
He's a good
shout
guy.
out to Korra in those episodes with Iroh when she was literally a 5-year-old brat throwing a temper tantrum, and there was no discernible difference from the rest of the episode. The rest of the series.
She acted exactly the same, but at least her body matched her now.
Exactly.
And also shout out to General Iroh, a completely underutilized character who did nothing, but had a bitchin' design and name.
And he was handsome.
I wanted to bring up General Iroh earlier when we were talking about sort of the technology of the world and sort of its implications in a more modern setting, but it was underutilized. Because I remember, I was really excited whenever Iroh showed up, or General Iroh showed up at the end of season 1 with his Fire Nation air fleet, and they were gonna have this big scale battle. If you guys remember, I'm pretty sure that his entire fleet is down in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
So that's a stupid thing.
Well, it was interesting because they introduced the idea of this is the first time airplanes show up, which is yo, what? Airplanes show up, and then literally 3 years later, bandits have airplanes, and they're like, man, that's. This, again, it's this weird idea of technology, just it had, for a show which tries to get big ideas, it is a very juvenile idea about the democratization of technology, which
really, and how quickly technology even can become accessible. So I'm going to count that for your turn this round.
That's fair.
And Danny, I'm counting yours for your turn too. So Sarah, take us home. What is the last thing we get rid of in Avatar, The Legend of Korra?
Oh, that's a lot of pressure. Okay, yeah. I'm just gonna go back, honestly, to my boy Bolin, because
what did they do
just
to you?
character assassinated him so badly.
What a good boy.
He was a good boy, and then he became stupider and stupider, and they kind of pulled an Eric Matthews on him. And, like, he almost became interesting again when he was, like, working for Kuvira, but it was like the characterization they ended up with was not the one they started with, and that one was better.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Bolin was so shitty to all of his partners. Like, why are these two boys who were so good and pure now just so shitty to all their partners?
Oh my god, it was a metaphor about boys.
Oh my god, I forgot about Bolin's, like, love interest thing. That was weird, and he was a jerk. Yeah. You're right.
I will say, I think a standalone Nuck Talk movie about his entire saga would be just fine.
That.
I'm okay with that.
I would watch that over this. Also, can I have a bonus real quick?
Yeah, we're out of lightning round now, so you can talk.
Oh, I was to say, like, just cut Korra.
Yeah,
just cut Korra.
She's a profoundly unlikable protagonist.
Like, literally, imagine how interesting it would have been to have Jinora and Asami develop a relationship over the course of the series, as we see someone who's, like, born in privilege and someone who, like, has to, like, contend with her family's legacy and, like, rebuilding her people's culture.
An aesthetic monk. Like, they are poor on purpose.
Also, that aesthetic, would have been great. But no, we don't get nice things.
Yeah. So anyway, one thing I wanted to discuss in this category, like, in more detail, because Sarah does disagree, so we're going to actually go on and I will introduce the point as, it left a very bad taste in my mouth that the new airbenders that got created during Harmonic Convergence were then kind of rounded up by Tenzin and co. and kind of forced into adopting air nomad culture without much of a choice. Like, they did have a choice, but they were really dicks about it. And a lot of them didn't really seem to want to be there or do this, and they had cultures of their own and stuff that was going on in their lives, and it always bothered me that the show wasn't critical of Tenzin in that.
That's actually the only thing I disagree with. The rest of it, I completely agree with you. This was an interesting and bad thing that was happening, of these people having to give up their culture against their will. I do feel like the show was kind of critical of Tenzin for it, though.
Elaborate for me. Because my memory's not super great about the show.
Mine's not super great either, but I feel like some of these people call him out on it, and he's shown as being the one kind of in the wrong by forcing them to dress a certain way and eat certain foods and act a certain way and come and leave their families and join him. I feel like he is portrayed in the negative light there, though it should have been stronger and possibly more of the focus of conversation.
Yeah, and condemning the movement, not just the person. Like, because they still do that. They still end up all being air nomads.
This is true. This is very true.
Well, I will say, having just watched this, like, that season earlier this week, like, yesterday I finished that season, Tenzin was shown to be in the wrong in this. Again, like so many other things, they just kind of stopped addressing it because, like, the lesson wasn't saying to Tenzin, like, these people are airbenders, but they're not air nomads. You need to learn how to interact with them. The lesson was, Tenzin, how can you be a better teacher?
Yeah, it was like, Tenzin, how can you indoctrinate these people better? As opposed to, hey, Tenzin, maybe you shouldn't be doing that.
And I think it would have been, it could have been great. They could have had a really interesting conversation about the necessities of maintaining the air nomad traditions and so on and so forth. Yeah. And they just kind of messed that all up.
And then they just kind of just ignored it for the rest of the show, because that's what they do in this show, is they introduce a cool idea, and then they resolve it at the end of an episode in, like, a stupid, ham-handed way, and then they never come back to it. And it has no consequences.
That concept and, like, reintroducing all that, it was interesting, but the problem was, like, they never really talk about how the air nomads and the air nation they're trying to rebuild this place from this one guy who learned from his dad, who was 12 when he got frozen in ice and had a 100-year gap where there were no air nomads. And then his dad was like, man. And then his dad was like, I guess you gotta, like, rebuild based on what I remember and what I can read and figure out. So, like, at the end of the day, it's like Luke trying to rebuild the Jedi, but if he'd just been like, the exact same thing, we're gonna do everything exactly the same, based on, like, what Yoda told me one time it was like.
Yeah. You're playing cultural telephone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that would have been very interesting. But then they were like, but what if we didn't? And I was like, hold on now. And then they did it anyways.
They were so close to having a good show on their hand. They just didn't follow through with any of the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
I do want to point out one good thing that we have not touched on even once, I don't think. The Beifongs were great.
That's
all.
Lynn
That's
a lot.
all.
They were great, and I feel like they, unfortunately, other than Lynn, were too little too late for me.
Yes,
but I
that's
did
fair.
love them. I loved them all in their original context, and after this I'm going to go write 300 pages of the Legend of Jinora fanfiction, and AU of the Legend of Korra, where Korra is a side character instead, and is kind of this, obnoxious, loud-mouthed teen that Jinora hangs out with sometimes, but would rather not.
I'm going to say that I think that the Beifongs were emblematic of a larger problem of the series, which we haven't really touched on too much, is that the show never really understood if it was going to be about the new Avatar or about the original cast's kids.
Yes, that was a big problem.
And I feel like Andrew and I discussed briefly a way to avoid that would have been to just set the show further out.
Yes.
Like, make it further in the future so that that's no longer an issue other than Aang's granddaughter type thing.
Yeah.
You have to pick, and it feels a lot like Korra was shoehorned into this show about what happened to the descendants of the gang.
Yeah.
With two A's.
Because, I mean, in season 2 and 3, there were entire episodes where we never saw Korra outside of maybe one scene or not at all, and it was just about, like, what are Tenzin, Bumi, and Kaya up to?
Oh, yeah, they're on their fun road trip where they find out that Aang was a terrible father.
Oh, yeah, can we talk about how that's a dumb thing? Because Aang would have been a wonderful father, and he's a beautiful ray of sunshine, and I don't take kindly to them saying that about my boy.
Oh, wow, I just remembered that episode. I just remembered that episode for the first time. Like,
Yeah.
Because that's when you meet the waterbender daughter of Aang, whose name I can't remember.
Kaya.
That's where Kaya has her first development. And I don't hate the idea of, like, Aang had a lot on his plate, and he wasn't always a great dad, but that's something to tell the Avatar or Jinora who are, like, trying to live up to this idea of this person. That's a moment for Tenzin to be a mentor, to say, like, my dad wasn't all of that. He wasn't perfect. He was a person, and he tried his best, but there were times where he didn't accomplish everything he wanted to, and there were times where things got left by the wayside. There are times where he failed too.
Like, everyone screws up.
And that's a good moment.
But then they were just like, what if instead we just told you Aang was a crappy dad, and Tenzin gets mad about that fact, and also then we cut to commercial, and now we're going to talk about Korra hanging out with the Beifongs some more, I guess.
Also, like, how is every single one of these families so dysfunctional?
Yeah.
Seriously. Like, all these siblings hate each other, except we never figure out who Sokka's kids are. Does Sokka just, like...
Sokka and Suki got shafted, and...
Yeah.
One thing I will say about, like, I can see Toph's family being dysfunctional, if only because I don't think Toph was the type of person who would have been a good mother. I don't think Toph is also the kind of person who would really want to have kids.
Yeah, there was a cool comic about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say they introduced this family where Toph starts this entire kind of clan in the comic series The Rift, which I will just go on the record as saying all those comics are wonderful.
But they're also not written by Brian and Mike, which I think is why they're good.
Yeah, that's fair. But as far as, like, sort of expanding the Avatar canon, they're pretty good. And what I will say is, I can see Toph being well-intentioned, wanting to sort of have a family, but she knew, and definitely as an older lady, when she shows up in season 4, I think, that it just really wasn't the life for her.
Yeah. And, like, that, so I can buy Toph's kids being a little dysfunctional, but, like, Aang and Katara strike me as the kind of people who would be trying really hard to be really good parents at all times. They're just, they're just really good people, and I feel like I get Aang focusing on his airbender kid a little bit too much, but I feel like that shouldn't have translated into Aang was a crappy dad all the time.
Yeah, and I also feel like even if that was the case, I feel like Katara would have
balanced it out and told it. Katara would have called him on it. Katara's not afraid to call people out.
That's true.
So that is just the thing, and I would have loved to see where Sokka and Suki's kids ended up, because apparently that's what we were doing, was just a world tour of the descendants. But so let's jump into what would our ideal version of the series be, with the caveat, the series we are trying to make is The Legend of Korra.
Diana. I'm just saying, don't do The Legend of Jinora. I know you want to.
It's not... I know. I really want to make The Legend of Jinora, but that's a different podcast, which will be 300 episodes long, and use a radio play using the script of the fanfiction I'm going to go right after this.
It's also just so we know, it is also not Legend of Jambone.
No, it is not The Legend of Jambo. But so we are going to try to take the idea of The Legend of Korra, a show about the Avatar after Aang, and we're going to try to salvage the parts that are here. Because there's a lot of good working parts, but there's a lot of gum in those gears.
There's so much gum.
Yeah. So assuming we keep the first 6 episodes more or less the same, maybe write the love nonsense a little better, but let's assume that arc stays roughly the same. You know, we meet Korra, she's fun and hard-headed, and wow, she's got a lot to learn about the world and stuff. She's sheltered.
But I believe that Korra can become the Avatar.
Yeah!
Well, I want to lead off this discussion of how we'd rework it with 2 things. One, I want to bring up something I brought up earlier. Tenzin didn't really work as a teacher for Korra, so I think maybe halfway through this season, like, they realized that Tenzin and Korra didn't really have a very good relationship as teacher and student, and then they sort of have Jinora fill that role.
Yeah.
My second thing is that I think airbending should have been much more integrated into the themes of at least the first season.
Yeah.
Like, it was called Air.
Right, which you know, that means a lot to the fans of The Last Airbender, because we had Book 1, Water, Earth, and then Fire, and all those seasons were they revolved in some way around Aang learning those types of bending and sort of the lifestyles.
Even thematically, like, season 1 is all about change. Like, the Avatar's back, that's changing the world. This is how the Northern Water Tribe gets changed by the Fire Nation attacking. This is how the world has changed since Aang left. Water's the element of change. Earth is solid and steady, and so through that arc, we have a lot of, like, things that feel stagnant but purposefully, and Toph is not going to change. She's going to make Aang change to adapt to rock, and like then fire, and things were on fire, and they were in the Fire Nation.
But yeah, that's a really good point, honestly. And, you know, with what we knew about, you know, Aang was always a master of airbending, so we didn't really get to see him learn it in The Last Airbender. Yeah. You know, they hit on it in one episode in season 1 that I can remember, where Korra had to navigate all these, like, sort of revolving pillars or something. She had to learn how to sort of waft through it.
And she had to be the leaf.
Yeah, she had to waft through it like a leaf at the end. That was the one time I felt like she had sort of done something that kind of looked like traditional airbending.
Yeah, and then it just gets abandoned for punching airbending.
Yeah, and then she never did it again.
Air punching.
Yep.
Air punching.
And it makes sense why, like, firebending and earthbending could change based on pro-bending and, like, evolving it into modern martial arts. But not airbending, because the only airbenders were Tenzin and his kids.
Yeah.
Would have been ancient airbending.
Okay, so we, halfway through the season, we're at episode 6, and Jinora becomes Korra's airbending teacher, and we, you know, air is the element of freedom, and so Korra has to learn to stop looking at things through such narrow-minded cultural assumptions like she has, because she's super sheltered, and we start dealing with those themes, and also her cultural assumptions that the equalists are inherently wrong, because she's speaking from a place of privilege, and let's actually criticize her for it. Call her out on that shit.
That's a really good point.
Asami could call her out on that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make Asami more of
a character.
Yeah, like she's not a bender. Let's explore that dichotomy and that difference.
Literally the only non-bender in the entire main cast in the entire series who just gets ignored for like entire seasons, really.
Yeah, and Asami has a lot of potential as a thematic element. Like, she is, like, as you said, she's the inversion of the equalists' narrative, but also, as someone who, you know, often speaks from a position of privilege, Asami could be using her power to give power to the underprivileged, and she can be the opposite side of the coin of her dad, who is giving them power through violence and also is a butthead, as I recall. I do recall him being a butthead.
Yeah, he was helping Amon, giving Amon technology or whatever.
And weapons and stuff. So have Asami be the other side of that coin, like giving them a voice and trying to guide them through the thicket in a way. Like, and so have Asami ever do anything. Would be a good thing. Cut the entire episodes that were about the love triangle.
Oh,
Again,
yeah.
Just forget that.
I'm gonna say
Bolin and Mako and Korra as the love triangle works.
Yeah, that was okay.
If that had been the primary focus, especially if like at some point maybe Mako does develop things for Korra and it becomes a thing where like he knows that Bolin likes her. He's someone who's always put his brother first.
Yeah.
His entire life.
And meanwhile, Asami over here is like, man, Korra's biceps though. And those shoulders, damn.
I just needed one of those, and it would. I would have died on that hill.
Yeah, listen, we only needed 3 seconds of Tano existing.
Yeah, really.
To die on that hill.
I would die on that hill.
I didn't need 3 seconds of my boy Tano. All right.
So that's the other thing in season 1. Tano
stays.
Somehow comes around to be part of the group, reluctantly or otherwise.
I feel like with Tano, So he leaves at episode 6 as usual, but then comes back, in the end where we wanted him to get his bending back and we wanted to see that.
Yes.
Just give him a moment, even if it's not voiced, of, hey, Tano got his bending back, and then we're into, in season 2 he becomes a character. But let's talk about Amon not being a bender. And also, I actually really like the idea of Amon not ever being identified, because I don't think it's like V for Vendetta. It doesn't matter who Amon is, because Amon is correct, and he's the face of a movement. That's why he wears a mask, except in the narrative they made, he wears a mask because he's Unalaq's brother, or what's his name?
Tarlok?
He's Tarlok's brother.
Tarlok's brother.
Now, Tarlok was actually pretty cool.
His name is Noatak.
Or, if you want him to be his brother, don't make him a bender, or make him an energy bender. I like the idea also of the Avatar cycle getting screwed up, but I'm gonna say, just to keep it simplified, just call it like, hey, Amon is just some guy, and we don't find out who he is.
Somehow we haven't brought this up at all throughout the entire episode, but one of the worst things, especially about season 1 for me, look, people have a lot of rationale for it, but if you're gonna make it so that bloodbending, which we know we have established rules for bloodbending from The Last Airbender, can somehow block someone's ability to bend, explain it when it, because I saw people say, oh, well, you can block the chakra by moving well, who cares what you
your speculation doesn't matter, because ultimately the show didn't say
it gets all your blood in the wrong veins and up in your pores, and they just don't move no good.
I think it's very easy to make that better. The lion turtle chose him as worthy for some reason.
Maybe the lion turtle wants to bring balance back because benders have too much power now.
And
that would have been fascinating.
That would have been fascinating. So give that backstory some room to breathe. And if you still want him to be Tarlok's brother, fine, you can still have your double suicide, but don't make him a bender. It undermines the entire movement.
Amon, I think, is like the tragedy of the show, I think.
Yeah.
In a tragic show, he was the most tragic,
also,
tragically used, I mean.
It was Steve Bloom.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Y'all.
For those of you who don't know, Steve Bloom is a voice actor and he's very, very good. Like literally go back in your childhood, look at all your favorite shows, Steve Bloom is probably in them as characters that you love.
I mean, he's Spike in Cowboy Bebop, there you go.
Yeah. He's all over the animes that the kids love.
He was Tom on Toonami.
He was the voice of Toonami.
So if you were born in the 90s, you already love him.
Honestly though, Tom on Toonami sounds like some kind of weird like surfer like radio show, like, hey there fellow shredders, it's Tom on Toonami.
For season 1, first 6 episodes stay the same, what we've gone through so far. Jinora becomes Korra's airbending teacher. Amon isn't a bender. He was chosen by a lion turtle. And you can still even end on the double suicide because it is an impactful moment. And I am trying to keep the show as close to the original as possible without using the bad parts. So Andrew, what else about Amon would you like to talk about before we move into season 2?
Here's my big thing, is that one of the biggest problems that Korra focuses on, I know I've said there are a lot of biggest problems, this is probably like the biggest meta problem, is that Avatar: The Last Airbender had a continuous story. It was the story of Aang defeating the Fire Lord, mastering 4 elements, and restoring the world to balance. That was the meta-narrative which we were following, and everything played into that. You still have your individual, seasonal stories and arcs. Korra had 4 individual arcs, which had very little to do with each other outside of Korra was in them, and all of the original cast's kids were, yelling at each other the whole time.
Yeah, and I feel like, on the one hand, I understand that's a limitation that existed because they didn't know they were getting another season after the first one, so they did write a self-contained narrative. But as we've demonstrated so far, there were a lot of loose threads you could have continued with, at least thematically, to create a more cohesive whole than these 4 standalone seasons that have nothing to do with each other.
They tried to make each season, world-ending.
Yeah,
almost.
And so it created that power scaling issue where every problem, like in Dragon Ball Z, every problem has to be able to end the world or no one's going to watch.
Yeah.
That's the problem they run into, is they turn it into DBZ. Which again, DBZ's not bad, but Breiki they were never equipped to write Dragon Ball Z. That's not what they were writing. So
they weren't the DBZs. They were they were the others. Part of my thing is, so season 2 and 3, there were very strong retcon elements which you can notice if you looking for them. Number 1, Korra's dad was apparently the heir to the Water Tribe.
Oh yeah, that was random.
Which they never mentioned, and Korra went from just being someone who was the daughter of 2 normal people to now some kind of weird princess thing. Okay, whatever. But then season 3, they say oh, by the way, Udalak was also a member of the Red Lotus, which we never really get into the Red Lotus either. Yeah.
Totally forgot.
I think that the strongest thing that you could do with this series is, number one, obviously, Amon is not a bender. Make Amon like either the Avatar Cycle Redux, like, or someone who had a purity of purpose, which was what the Lion Turtle required to teach energy bending to. What you do then is you have Korra defeat Amon not with bending, but with ideas. She proves to Amon, she doesn't change his opinion entirely, but she shakes him enough that he cannot energy bend anymore. And he notices it, but he's still trying to take away her energy, and she saves him from that. She saves him from what he was doing to himself. And then Amon is shaken. He is changed as a person. Amon escapes, and then we have Amon as in a Zuko-esque arc. How, does he change? Does he grow as a person? How does this affect Amon as he is integrated into the Order of the Red Lotus, which again can play into the ideas of Amon, equality.
And actually, that plays better into the stupid Dark Avatar plot.
It does. It really does, actually.
Like, if you want to keep Season 2 being about the world building of what the Avatar is and that balance and Rava and Vatu, Amon is a much better Avatar. I mean Avatar in the thematic sense, not in the literal, the Avatar sense.
Right. And the thing is, Amon is someone who, if he were a full-on energy bender, energy bending can take away bending, but it can also give bending.
That's true.
So then Amon has to make choices. Is he going to compromise his own values in order to try and create a more just and equitable world? Maybe that's how Zahir gets airbending. This, like, dangerous criminal gains airbending.
Yeah, make Amon the method, the hand behind, like, everything.
Yeah, and then we have Kuvira as this alternate antagonist throughout Season 3 and then 4, wherein, at the end of the day, this is a final confrontation between the Red Lotus and, like, their army of kind of, like, creative benders, and between Kuvira, like, saying, we need to have the strongest fucking military we can to throw against these people. Then you have authoritarian versus freedom, and you have the Avatar having to find some kind of balance. This whole time, you have a team of Korra, Jinora, aged up a few years, so it's not weird that they're hanging out like a 10-year-old, Mako, Bolin, Asami, and, Tano. I'm gonna say it. Tano in there because
him in the mix.
Tano because Tano had a very interesting relationship with all the main cast.
Guys, everyone pause. Tano would have been the perfect Nuftuck.
He would have been. They also, you know, if they had integrated Tano into Team Avatar, they wouldn't have had to make Mako and Bolin jerks.
Yes, because then you have Tano to be a jerk all the time, because Tano is a jerk. He just is a mean person, and that's valid.
And you get to see Tano grow and how, like, he's someone who, like, feels like he owes the Avatar something. The Avatar, like, brought his bending back. But at the end of the day, Tano doesn't really know how to interact with people because everything about him is constructed. Yeah. Tano is someone who, as they go, as they change, as he sees how he could actually be a better person, maybe that scares the shit out of him, and he doesn't really know what that's like, what it's like to be the good guy, to be the one who's helping, because at the end of the day, nothing has ever given him anything. Tano's had to fight and scrape for everything. He is just like Mako and Bolin, but without Mako and Bolin. He never had a brother. He never had anything. Oh, no. He was alone.
Oh no, I'm sad.
And then you actually have Amon show up and fucking have his character arc complete where he finally accepts, I'm wrong about what I'm doing. I'm not wrong. What I'm doing isn't wrong, but the way I'm doing it is wrong, and I need to come up with a better way to create an equal society and give him the Zuko arc. You have a better Team Avatar, which is more fleshed out. You can give Mako and Bolin, like, they're still whole arcs without... You can give them actual arcs without having the randos, and then you can have actual interesting love triangles. Like, man, what if, like, Tano, I don't know, starts filming things for Korra? Then you can have, like, organically developing, like, love situations without just Garbo. And then Korra can finally do what the entire series was promising to do but never got there, was Korra saves everyone by not fighting, by making choices which are not just, I'm just gonna punch it at the end of the day, baby. Come on, big giant laser match. You know how it is. It's me, Korra, the Avatar. Come on.
God, you know what? Even from a character design standpoint, having Amon in the Red Lotus, you could just change his little circle on his helmet into a Red Lotus tile.
Yeah, I'm in love with this whole, like, Red Lotus overarching thing, kind of causing, like, the conflicts later. Like, Andrew, you just nailed it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's, like, not a total wrap, because there's more things that I think we can flesh out with this, but, like, Andrew, can we write this fan fiction, please? Can we just write all of it?
Yes, I am 100% in. And again, like that's like a meta-narrative arc involving, like, overarching character, like, arcs and such, but I did not get into at all anything involving because I would go on for 30 minutes if I was getting into, like, the interpersonal relationship. Then I just watched this whole series. I have a lot of feelings on it, and I feel like, oh my god, it could have been so much better.
Man.
Like Tano, the last thing I'll say about it is Toph has a line in season 3 which says, like, sometimes you gotta let the kids take over.
Yeah.
The kids of these people should not have been as important as they should have been. Yeah. And that's where I'll say.
I wanna fix season 2 while we're at it, real quick. So because I think in general this whole Red Lotus idea, sort of integrating all the villains together, that's great. But I still think there's not much we can work with in season 2 in general. So I think you use those 12 episodes that you get in season 2 and just tell a really cool story about gangs in Republic City.
Yeah, like,
yes!
Do that while Amon is building his Red Lotus army in the background. And you can still have harmonic convergence nonsense in the spirit world going on if Amon, and Amon gets Vatu and becomes a literal Dark Avatar, and then that gives him, the energy bending even more powerful.
Yeah.
Like, that's going on, and then at the end, the gangs are happening, and maybe Amon's recruiting from these gangs, and then Korra is like, oh crap, Amon is still here, and now he's, like, corrupted even further, and now maybe everyone has a cool Amon mask that's in the Red Lotus, because that would be cool.
That would be cool.
And, yeah, and then you can just then roll right into season 3 with Zahir and the pals, and everything Andrew said. And yeah, we have to write that fanfic now, Andrew. I'm sorry to put another writing project on you, but
it's so good though. I want it.
It's so good, so we gotta go make it now.
I mean, honestly, the only reason that it works so well is because, like, the characters on paper and conceptually and based on when they were first introduced were all so strong. These are all characters who, like, outside of, like, the villains, were all characters introduced in season 1 that you can use for season 1. Like,
and they are really strong, like you said, on paper. And Brian and Mike create a great world. Like, Avatar: The Last Airbender and the universe within the universe of Korra are, like, my favorite fictional settings, other than Pokemon, because I want all of the furry, but the friends who are furry. I mean, I'm friends with furry. Some of my best friends are furry.
That being
said, just stop.
We are not kink shaming. No kink shaming. If my mom thinks being furries isn't weird, then we don't.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway, but there's a lot of stuff here that's really great on paper, and then like Andrew said, they just didn't follow through, and that's why it could have been great, and it will be in the 300-page fanfiction series that Andrew and I are going to put up on all your favorite fanfiction websites, because, man, that was a really good pitch, man.
That was great. I'm sold.
I hope we get you discovered one of these days.
Well, because I had the original idea, like, way back when, talking with Danny, honestly, about Legend of Korra and, like, where it can go. This is what Amon could be, this is what Amon could do, and how, like, Amon could eventually become this person. And then, like, watching it all this week, things kind of fell into place. And watching it all continuously, it's like, all these factors putting together, like, really would have made it a compelling show. And if our major link to the old cast was Jinora, who was trying to, like, teach Korra while also proving herself to Korra, because Korra is Aang and Aang is her granddad, who is the reason the Airbenders are around, but she never met Aang because she's the same age as Korra and he died for. That's this whole hugely tangled mess, and I love it.
Yeah. Also, I will vote for keeping Lin Beifong, because I think she's perfect and beautiful and doesn't need to be anything other than what she is. She's just a beautiful, beautiful swan.
Plus, if you have, like, a scrappy gang of vigilantes going around and trying to restore peace in the city, you gotta have the hard-nosed cop, like, trying to keep them in line.
And no one's better than Lin Beifong for that.
No,
absolutely.
Lin Beifong can be in there, but just, like...
She's flawless. But she's not, like... The whole Beifong drama doesn't come up much. That can be for Janora's story, which is a different fan fiction. But, alright. So I think we've fixed it. So, you're welcome, Nickelodeon. You can start animating this whenever. Just send all of your money to... make out your checks to cash.
Well, hold on now. I'm saying that, when they pick this up, I better be a fucking writer over there.
Oh yeah, no.
They better
sorry, that was
me.
my next thing, is make out the checks to me as cash and then hire Andrew.
I need a job.
Yeah. Hire Andrew. So that's our show. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Actually, we won't see you. This is an audio medium. You won't see us either.